Hello there, I'm Presley, and today I will be going over the events of and giving my overall thoughts on episode 24 of the Bleach 1000-Year Blood War. Now, this episode covers chapters 597 to 601 and a single page from 604. Now, the episode starts off with a crazy new scene, that takes place 1,000 years ago, where we see Ichibei meeting with Yhwach, to discuss some things. And, this is before Yhwach invades the Soul Society for the first time 1,000 years ago. So, these are the negotiations that took place before that happened. And I'm not going to go over everything that was said in this conversation because there was a lot said in this scene. After a bit of talking between Ichibei and Yhwach, one of the Sternwitters opens fire on Ichibei. Obviously Ichibei is able to deflect this and send it flying back. Another Sternwitter shields the Sternwitter that, just opened fire on Ichibei. And we learn several things during this scene. Technically, this is the first instance in the anime of Yhwach referring to the Soul King as his father. And we also learn a bit more about Yhwach's motives, as a character here. Another thing we see is when Yhwach approaches Ichibei and attempts to steal one of his arms, one of the Soul King's arms, Ichibei seals away the Almighty, which is, Yhwach's Shrift. You can have the Soul King's arm, but it's going to cost you, telling him that he'll never be able to use the Almighty again as long as he's alive. And, we see this meeting come to a close. We cut back to present day, where we see Yhwach, Uryu, and Yugrum, where we last saw them at the entrance of the royal palace. We have Yhwach and Yugrum talking a bit. We see Yugrum summon several soldates. And we also see Senjumaru standing on top of the stairs, directly opposite of where they're standing, staring down at them. Then the opening theme plays. Then, of course, we see Kisuke, where he's getting ready to send Ichigo, Orihime, Chad, and Yoruichi to the royal palace, obviously. However, then we have Ganju show up, and he wants to go with them. And, after a bit of talking back and forth, they let Ganju come with them. And we see Kisuke launch the container, sending them flying towards where the royal palace is. We cut over to several characters where we see them reacting to this. We see the Soul Dot move forward, and we see the Soul King's Blade, as they're called, rush forward to take them on. We then see several of the Soul King's Blade surround Yhwach. However, when they attempt to slash at him, they aren't able to hit him. Their blades curve. And then we see a character appear out of the ground, rising out of the shadows, being Sternwitter W, the Wind, Nyanzel, and we have him begin to explain how his Shrift works. Anything that gets close to him bends and winds in a different direction to avoid him. Right? And he demonstrates this by moving his finger closer to the group of the Soul King's Blade that are surrounding him, and we see where their bodies contort and shift in one direction. And we see as a result, it just fully tears them in half. Of course, we get a bit more dialogue. Then ultimately, Senjumaru states that while Nyanzel was standing there, she retailored his outfit using her own fabric. And we see her take a hold of the needle that she has in her hand, and she lifts it up slightly, and we see where Nyanzel is just impaled from several directions from this outfit he's wearing. It is quite gruesome. This kills Nyanzel, obviously. We then cut over to where we see Ichigo and the others as they're currently flying up there. We have Yoruichi explaining a bit more about the royal palace and the Soul King. And, we cut back over to where Yuhabak is currently, and we see shadows appear on the ground beneath him, and we see stepping out of those shadows his royal guards. And of course these characters are Stenritter M, Gerard Valkyrie, Stenritter C, Pernida, Stenritter X, Lie Barrow, and of course Stenritter D, Askin Naklivar. And of course we see Gerard rush forward, sword drawn, rushing over to where Senjumaru is. We see the attack slash through one of the arms that is attached to her. We see her calling out for the Soul King's shield. We see this massive armored thing drop down from the sky. Then of course we see Pernida use his Shrift to just crush this thing, cause it to crumple in on itself. Then of course we see Lie Barrow shoot Senjumaru, right in the head. We see her fall to the ground. We see blood pool everywhere. We then see Pernida, crumple up her body. We then see Lie, shoot down all the different, plates, which each belong to a member of the Zero Division. However, just as it seems as though things are going their way, we see the scenery being revealed to be fabric, it's cloth, flowing in the wind. We see Senjumaru appear, she's fine, and she explains that this is actually a fake royal palace that they built to lure them in, while the real royal palace was being hidden by Ichibei. And we briefly see Ichibei over there, and as Lie is getting ready to fire another shot, we see where it is stopped, as soon as he does, by a giant branch, and we see where these branches have risen up and enclosed the area in a giant cage, which, of course, was constructed by Hikifune. And, we see her lean around one of the corners, and Hikifune basically explains that, that their abilities cannot escape this giant cage that she's constructed. We see Tenjiro, jump down as well, he's here now. Then of course after we see Senjumaru, Hikifune, and Tenjiro there, we of course see a spotlight shine down onto one area. And of course right after that we have the appearance of the #1 Zanpakuto creator himself, Oetsu, carrying a giant container of this gel-like fluid with a sword in it. And we see Oetsu take the blade out of the container it was just stuck in. Of course, Gerard rushes into where Oetsu is. Oetsu easily dodges out of the way of his attack. Oetsu states that, it's his turn now. And we see where Gerard suddenly collapses to the ground. And we see a spurt of blood appear where he's been slashed. And Oetsu goes about explaining that the sword he is using is a sword that kills with a single swing. Of course, Lie thinks that he's lying about this sword. So of course he shoots at Oetsu. However, we instead see the shot land in two separate branches and, instead of hitting Oetsu. And, Lie wants to know what just happened, obviously. And Oetsu states that, his shot did strike Oetsu's blade, but it was cut in half. He sends more shots towards Oetsu. Oetsu, he continues to cut them in half. He gets closer, and we see where he strikes Lie. And, we see a giant spurt of blood, just from where Lie has been cut as he falls backwards. Pernida attempts to do something, but, has the sword thrown through his cloaked face. Oetsu, he rushes over, we see him jump over there, he grabs it, he pulls it out of Pernida. Then he turns around and slashes Askin. Then, of course, we see where Yuhabak has thrown his medallion in the air. And then, when it's gone through the, opening in the cage, and we suddenly see where his medallion's no longer a thing out there. He is. He is now out of the cage. And we see where the medallion's now on the ground. Obviously the Zero Division is shocked at this. We see where Yhwach is standing in front of Ichibei. And we have them exchange words for a bit before the episode ends. And, of course the ending theme plays. And, that's the end of the episode. Now, the ending poem for this episode was from volume 67. From the perspective of Ichibei. Now, overall, I thought this episode was fantastic. I loved it. I really loved the addition of the meeting between Ichibei and Yhwach. Honestly, all the stuff with the Zero Division so far has been great. I love it. I cannot wait for next week's episode. Well, I guess this is where I'm going to end this review. Thank you for watching. I hope you have an amazing week, and I will see you next episode. Bye!